Well, hello and welcome. I'm very excited that you're able to join us today to talk about how to maintain a sense of community in a socially distanced world. We've got a great panel. We hold these sessions every week, and we invite in 3 local government leaders to participate in the conversation. It's really focused on just getting a better understanding about the challenges that communities are running into from an engagement standpoint, and the creative ways that communities are dealing with maintaining some sense of community and connection with their residents as they work their way through this very challenging time. Our goal is that you get a new idea, a fresh perspective, and something that you'll be able to use in moving your community forward. Here's how the day is scheduled to go. We'll take a few minutes to meet our panelists for today, and we'll allow them to briefly introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their background. Then I'll kick off the conversation for the panel. We're going to be asking 3 questions of each of the panelists on what they're doing for maintaining this sense of community. And then during the second half of our time, we'll spend a little bit of time seeing if there's any questions from the audience and respond to those questions. But look forward to getting into the conversation. Let me introduce our panelists for the day. Our first panelist is Al Vanderberg. Al's been a county administrator in Ottawa County, Michigan for the past 17 years, although he's been in the profession for over 30 years. Al is a recognized leader at the state and national level. He served in numerous leadership roles, including as president of the Michigan Municipal Executives, Michigan Association of County Administrative Officials, and Al has received gubernatorial appointments to numerous important state commissions and councils. He's been an ICMA legacy leader for the past decade, which only underscores his commitment to the public sector and professional management. I gotta say, Al, I was also impressed with your unbelievable memory when you and I were connecting on talking about doing this panel conversation today. It reminded me of the details of the conversation we had 10 years ago. So that certainly had an impact on me. Al, would you mind just sharing a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I came back to Ottawa County 17 years ago to my home county, which has been mostly a plus, I'll say, over the years. But I've been in public management now for 36 years, about 2/3 of that in county government and 1/3 of that in city governments. And I just happened to land in a profession that I love. I love coming to work every day. Even though there's challenges, it's been a huge amount of fun for me to be in public management. I also teach at Grand Valley State University in the undergrad and master's programs, and that's helped me connect with youth and help develop tomorrow's leaders and tie internships into some of my classes, and it's been really cool. So looking forward to today's panel. Certainly COVID has been a test, I think, of our experience and resiliency, both as individuals, also the communities that we work for. And thank you, Matt, for the invitation. I'm certainly very pleased to be here today.
That's great, Al. Thanks so much for sharing that. I'm very excited about our second panelist as well, Theo Melanchon, who's been the city manager in Dayton, Texas for the past 3 years. Theo has been in state and local government roles over the past decade, including in Louisiana, where he worked with Louisiana State University and the Office of General Counsel for the state. What I've been very impressed with is Theo's commitment to helping guide his community forward following disciplined development principles and performance metrics. I think one of the things I picked up, Theo, is that you do have a commitment and an appreciation of how communities are really in a global environment, and the success of our communities are going to be based upon creating a place where people are interested in investing in, and engagement certainly plays into that whole thing. Would you mind just sharing a little bit more about yourself? Oops, Theo, I'm sorry, you're on mute.
It's my fault. Sorry, we had a train passing. I didn't want y'all to have to hear the horn. Yes, I grew up in Louisiana, went to school at LSU, received a master's in law degree, thought I was going to be an attorney. Very quickly realized I wanted to do something else. Found a great value in local government administration. I love it. I love being able to touch the lives of people every day. It's great to be able to drive to work and point at things and say, I'm a part of that. I did that. You know, I was something very tangible that I enjoy. Being in Dayton, one of the things that's very exciting is that we are a part of a large growing metro. Houston's metro is just expanding out. They have a brand new 187-mile loop that is being completed. Its last segment is going through Dayton, Texas. So as of right now, we're working on some major developments on we have a 2,600 acre industrial park. We have a 7,200 acre master plan community coming in. But the big work we've been doing is trying to take a community that is historically agricultural, historically rural, and trying to get them to move into best practices. And I'm very proud to say that in 2019, we were named Sustainable City of the Year for the state of Texas. And in 2020, we were Community of the Year through the American Planning Association's Texas chapter. All of those things help build a community that brings in good jobs, good economic development. Even in times of COVID, businesses are still trying to figure out long-term planning beyond the pandemic. And it's been very important for us as a community to never forget that while businesses are looking years in the future, so are we. And so I'm really looking forward to talking more about that.
That's great, Theo. It's got to be just really exciting to work in a community that's got so much activity going on, and it just probably underscores the importance of understanding where your resident values are and the engagement aspect of making sure you're incorporating the needs of your residents and businesses. That's very cool. I'd like to introduce Doug Schultz, who's our third panelist. Doug's the city manager in Banning, California. Like our other panelists, Doug has held numerous leadership positions at both the state and national levels. Doug's been the president of the Washington City County Management Association, and he's been involved with several ICMA committees. Doug's commitment to professional local management dates back over 3 decades, including city management positions in Washington and Minnesota prior to coming to California. Doug is also an ICMA legacy leader. And just let me add, Doug, one of the things that really impressed me about your resume is just the extent of your involvement with ICMA committees. I was on the ICMA board a while back, and just really appreciate folks that contribute to the profession like you have. Would you mind just sharing a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, as you mentioned, I started my career in Minnesota. They happened to find an internship that turned out to roll into a full-time job as an assistant, and that launched me into a job as a city administrator shortly after that. So I ended up in the first city administrator in a small city in Minnesota, kind of learning my way. And the consultant that did the search shared something with me that probably wasn't real good in recruiting for the job, but it really stuck with me throughout my career. He approached me about the job and he said, this is a job that every city manager should have in his career, but you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. And I kind of looked at him like, well, aren't you trying to recruit for this job? And he said, yeah, but you got to understand, a job in a small city where you're wearing a lot of different hats, you're responsible for a lot of different things, you earn your battle scars. And I certainly did earn my battle scars in that job, but it really helped me to understand the profession, understand my role as a city manager, and carried throughout my career the lessons I learned in that community. A community of 2,000 people that is a full service city with airports, cemeteries, golf courses, and you have a staff of 3 people. You do everything from driving a backhoe and a Zamboni to high level financial planning and working with council and strategy. So it really gave me a good foundation that I've carried throughout my career. But after that community, most of my career was spent in very affluent communities that I have to say the job didn't really give me the satisfaction I was looking for. So when I saw the position open up here in Banning, I found a community that had been stagnant for 2 decades. Everything around it growing, but this community was stagnant. Very, very poor community, very diverse community, the type of community that really needs good local government. And that's what attracted me to the job. And I have to say the past 2 years have been nothing but exciting and rewarding. And I look forward to hopefully finishing my career here.
Well, that's great. That sounds like a great career, in particular as you think about engagement and the importance of involving underrepresented folks that just don't generally get engaged in the process. That connection becomes so much more important.
Yeah.
So the topic today is maintaining a sense of community in a socially distanced world. COVID-19 has totally disrupted our normalcy and the way of life in all of our communities. And just given the unsettled nature of everything that we do, it's becomes all that much more important to have a meaningful connection with the community stakeholders and just simply to understand what their current needs are as their lives have been totally disrupted as well. It's got to be authentic, it's got to be consistent and persistent, but it's such an important part of creating that overall sense of community. Pandemic presents all sorts of challenges to maintaining the sense of community. So the opportunity today is really designed to get your perspectives on how you do that. And one of the ways to maybe start this conversation is just simply taking a look at the problem. Through our research, we've identified that about 80% of adults in the country have never even attended a council meeting. And I think all of you would probably appreciate the perspective of how difficult it is in normal times to actually get effective engagement. There's been so many times when I had attended meetings when staff outnumbered people who are participating. The way local government is sometimes designed creates barriers for people's involvement in the things that the communities are doing. Just the way that we're structured sometimes creates barriers and challenges that make it difficult for residents to feel like they're finding any kind of meaningful involvement or engagement, or that their voices are being heard in any kind of a way. So even before COVID started, we had these challenges, and now you throw on a pandemic to the situation, and all of a sudden, it is exponentially has become more challenging. People are having to adapt to a whole new world. They're working remotely while they're trying to homeschool their kids. They're being impacted financially, emotionally. There's just so much going on. And internally to government, the operations and the way that governments operate are changing significantly as well. So the question then becomes, how do you, as we start to emerge from this pandemic, how do you effectively engage your community in a way that is meaningful, effective, and works, and something that you can sustain over time? So here are the 3 questions that we're going to be exploring with each of you, and I'm just very interested in getting all of your perspectives on all of these topics. First question is, how has your communications and engagement strategy evolved since the beginning of the pandemic? How does resident engagement influence your success in maintaining a sense of community? And which tools do you currently use to measure feedback from a resident's perspective during these challenging times? Let's start with you, Al. And okay. How has Ottawa County's communication and engagement strategy evolved since the start of the pandemic?
Well, interestingly, in county government in Michigan, we are the ones that do public health. And so even though we've never faced anything quite on this scale before, we had faced other public health outbreaks. We've had norovirus outbreaks where we've had to close down a college or a restaurant or whatever. And so, or chickenpox outbreaks in schools. And so certainly this isn't the first rodeo on a public health crisis. And so really in February, we started communicating, even though our first confirmed case in Michigan didn't occur until March 15, just to start informing the public well ahead of time of, hey, this is a new virus, it's starting to spread across the country. And so at least we got a head start on communication before we actually had the first cases start to pop up. And then I think as kind of a philosophy, we fully adopted the CDC's emergency risk communication principles. So be first, be right, be credible, express empathy, promote action, and show respect. That was kind of the guiding principles of our communications approach. And then it became a matter of how do we, this is like riding an electronic bull to me, right? Even though I've never done one, I'd probably kill myself. But it seems like this thing changes not only daily, but sometimes many times during a day. And how do you keep up with that? And so we started doing, we started with traditional press briefings through our network, but then very quickly went to Facebook Live updates every day, and then tried to keep the public informed with, what is the status every day of the virus in the country, in the state, and in Ottawa County, and also West Michigan. Also, right away, we realized we had to reach diverse audiences. So Ottawa County has a very significant Hispanic population, and we noted that it was hitting this population much harder, 30% more than the Caucasian population. And in West Michigan, so Kent County has a more significant African-American population, it was even a higher impact. And so we started doing our Facebook Live broadcasts every day in both Spanish and in English in order to reach these audiences. And we also started tailoring messages to cultural differences as we built that communication model. And that was extraordinarily well received by the Hispanic community. I think too, as Matt referred to, one of the overwhelming challenges that really manifested during COVID-19, and I think it impacts other aspects of our lives. I love that chart you put up, Matt, because it highlights differences that we have in ideology. So Ottawa County is a very conservative Republican sort of county. And the state right now has a governor who is more Democratic and more liberal focused. And so part of the trick here was to figure out how to communicate when a good chunk of your population is thinking differently than the governor in an era where it's so much harder to agree on what truth is. If I had to look at what is a major issue that impacts us in a negative way, it's as Americans, we don't agree on what truth is anymore. And it makes our jobs that much more difficult. And I can talk more about that as we talk about tools later in this presentation. But I think that trying to understand our different publics, trying to message to our different publics and meet their needs, and using a variety of mechanisms to do that has been our focus.
How has your participation been on Facebook Live?
It has been, gosh, I don't have that percentage, and I should, and I can provide that to you later. But no, it's been outstanding. It grew. I would say that for each broadcast, we got up into the low thousands, and then as the pandemic went on, just the fact that we were doing this every single day, if there wasn't big state or national news, that number could go down to a few hundred. But certainly, that was one method we used, and we had other methods that also had a lot of participation.
Okay, thank you. Theo, could you share how your communication and engagement strategy has evolved in Dayton since the beginning of the pandemic?
Sure. Well, on our end of things, we kind of started out the traditional way we wanted. So we went through traditional modes of communication to start off with. One of the things that we added along the way was, and we used our billing services to mail stuff, a lot of our information. Another area we kind of evolved into was our Economic Development Corporation jumped in, and what they did was they started printing the disposable menus for our local restaurants, which gave us an opportunity to talk to the business owners one-on-one, give them a service, while at the same time sitting them down and talking about the public health issues going on, treat it as a public education opportunity. We thought that really helped a lot on the word of mouth portion of it, because our restaurants or a great gathering place for people to talk about what is going on, what is not going on, what is the city of Dayton doing. Being in Texas, obviously, is we have Governor Abbott, who kind of started out not really wanting to have a whole lot of executive order authority given to local governments, and then midway through the pandemic, it changed. Having already built those channels of communication with our local businesses really helped us along the way in explaining the changes in policy in Texas. We also used Facebook, usually through the county. We worked with our local hospital to also help in buttressing the argument as to why certain restrictions were in place. So it was really great for us to have the county judge and our hospital administrator working with the city managers and mayors to have one continuous drumbeat, one message, what is going on in Liberty County as a whole. And so we'd have a daily briefing behind the scenes before they went out with their videos. And I thought that really helped a lot too, having multi-levels of the government saying the exact same thing. That was a very huge part of it as well. So, it kind of morphed over time. Started out thinking press releases may be going into the businesses, providing a service to open communications, having Facebook and our other social media as part of it evolved into it as well. And similar to what Al was saying, was that at first we had a whole lot of interest, but I think fatigue has set in. And so what we did was we have tried to actually scale back some so that when changes, if there's any issues going on, we want to make sure that when we hit the public, that we're that there's obviously something major going on, because we did see a lot of our numbers trail off, especially by the end of the summer. About the time, sometime I would say probably around August is when we really started seeing our numbers dropping, and that's when we kind of sat back a little bit and really tried to measure when we outreach to the public.
Theo, do you have it sounds like you've got some pretty good intergovernmental relationships going on in the county? Yes.
So it was really great to be able to work with the county and our hospital district. We have a taxing entity that supports our local hospital. And so having the hospital administrator, county judge involved were very important in helping with what is truth. That goes back to what we were just discussing. What is the truth? Well, sometimes it's, sure, the city government saying this, but if the county judge is saying something completely different, that can undermine the whole situation. So that is very important that on our daily briefings with the mayors of the county, the city managers of the county attorney, county judge, hospital administrator, we were getting daily briefings. What are the talking points and on what the next steps were? Where were we going to take the restrictions? Everyone was on the same page. In fact, we went so far as to make sure that all the resolutions had similar language, that we didn't vary in our language as to what the restrictions were, even in resolutions and proclamations by the mayor.
Well, that's great. I love the way that you have brought in the public sector and involved them in that whole engagement process. The idea about connecting on the printing of restaurant menus is a very creative way to make those connections. And I imagine it had a pretty good impact on building relationships with those businesses. I'm sure.
Well, most of those restaurants don't have before the pandemic, how many restaurants had, I take for granted that I have a copy machine, that can handle thousands of copies. Most restaurants don't work that way. Your mom and pop cafe does not have a printer that can handle 1,000 copies,
Yeah, that's very true. Doug, how about you? How's the city of Banning's communication and engagement strategy changed or evolved over the course of the past year?
Sure. And, I think we've really tried to distinguish, or it's important to distinguish between communication and engagement. And, especially because of the pandemic, or specifically related to the pandemic, we're pushing a lot of information out, not necessarily doing a lot of engagement around that issue. but we've got other issues that are still part of what we do in city government that require engagement. Back in July, August, we also had a series of wildfires that were in the community and near the community, requiring evacuations. So, that combined with the fact that we were limiting, staff and public access to City Hall. We're trying to manage two emergency situations, really working remotely in a lot of ways. In both of those instances involved very close coordination with Riverside County. One with the Department of Public Health and the other with Emergency Services. So we've been challenged because we have very much like Allen's community. About 40% of the population in Banning is Hispanic, roughly 20% Black. So, very diverse community. Communities that have been hard hit by the pandemic. Communities that typically have not been engaged with local government, don't trust local government. So it's been important to get a consistent message out to the community with the county and with the state. With that said, we have a county supervisor that represents this area, and the majority of the city council here in Banning that hasn't necessarily been on board with the messaging. So it's been particularly challenging. So the strategy that we've taken is really to focus on parts of the message that people are in agreement on, and avoiding the areas where we can find ourselves in a debate over whether or not it's the truth. And it's been a little bit difficult. As far as the engagement piece, we've focused on really working with our community partners. As Theo mentioned, the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club, the school district, our nonprofits in the community, because they have membership bases that they trust much more than they trust city government or state government. So working through them to get communication out. We've done a number of food distributions in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce. That has really helped to build trust, because the community sees that we're actually out there providing food for community members in need, and it's not your typical services that the city provides. So and in doing so, we've been able to actually have some conversations with people to ask them, did you see the notice about the pandemic, or are you watching our channel 10, which is our local government access channel? We've really increased the use of video as a messaging tool. With video now, you can put it out on Twitter, you can put it out on Facebook, you can put it on your cable channel. There are all kinds of ways you can distribute video now, and I am a believer that people are much more likely to watch a short video than read a press release in today's time. So the other thing we've done, continued to do, that I wasn't sure how it would play out, but it's actually worked quite well. Before the pandemic, we would have what we call district meetings. Our city is represented by 5 different districts, and we'd go out into the districts, and a council member, myself, maybe a director would attend the meeting, and it would be coffee with the mayor, something like that, and that was a way to engage the community. We decided we were going to continue to do those, but instead of having them in a facility, we were going to have them in parks. And that gave us, the opportunity to social distance a little more, be outdoors instead of breathing indoor air. And we've actually had good results, good turnout. People really appreciate that we've tried to find ways to continue to provide engagement opportunities in ways that are a little difficult to do during a pandemic.
So are you guys is banning your council meetings? Are they being done remotely or are they in person?
In I guess it was June, we went to remote meetings and closed access to City Hall. The council really didn't like it. I think we did 2 meetings remotely, and they said, no, we're not gonna continue to do that. Our council chambers is big enough. We'll social distance and limit occupancy and have meetings in person. So we've been doing that again until our meeting next week. We're closing access to the public and just we'll have the council and only the staff that we need to have at the meeting. Everyone else will participate remotely. We've had a spike in the city, in particular in City Hall. So we shut down City Hall again and have most people working remotely.
Yep, understand. And do you have provisions for providing public input as part of those closed meetings?
Yeah, so we are using Zoom, and it's worked pretty well. Most people understand the situation, and I think Zoom is a platform that works pretty well. It's pretty user friendly, so we've found success with allowing public participation.
That's great. Good. Well, I tell you, let's move on to the second question. And I'm going to start with you, Theo, on this one. Theo, how do you think your engagement influences how successful Dayton is in maintaining its sense of community?
Trying to be respectful, but that train just keeps passing. You'll learn that that's the driver of our economics over here. So a little bit about, I think it's really local government at the end of the day is one of the key ingredients to keeping that communal feel. The city of Dayton, we have instituted over the last couple of years Food Truck Friday, which we have a plaza in downtown that we invite food trucks to come for free. And Friday at lunchtime, that was a big thing for people. Well, that shut down during COVID-19, especially in the early days, but people were clamoring to do something. And so we spent a lot of time trying to plan for a safe environment in these times, while also giving people their Food Truck Fridays back. I thought it was actually a great compliment that we had, that people were clamoring for something that the city created whole cloth. Normally everyone says that local government or government in general is the problem, and for once I felt like we were the solution to something, as kind of a juxtaposition to be in. And so we really sat down, put together an action plan to be socially distanced, to bring that back for where we have tons and tons of events. We have events that bring people together. How do you bring people together in these times? Well, we decided that the building can't be the meeting place, but what about the large parking lot right outside of it? Are there ways for us to manage the traffic? And so a lot of our events, we socially distance inside the building, but it spills over outside into the parking lot, which has been amazing. And so we've been able to get some attendance. Of course, the attendance is not nearly what it would be in a pre-pandemic situation, but people are starting to feel like things are getting back to normal a little bit like that. And I think if anything, it has actually strengthened the ties. I think it gave people a sense of understanding of the threads that keep a community together. Whenever you lose it for a little while, you start realizing what you had and you want it back. And so it's been really wonderful in Dayton. And our public works department our police department is really feeling a lot of love from our community right now.
Well, that's great. You know, one of the things that we've discovered is that people's trust in government, especially local government, has actually increased just based upon the way that the local governments have connected with the residents in kind of creative ways. And so I think you're emphasizing that point very well. Doug, how is it in banning? How does your engagement play into your success in maintaining a sense of community?
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest struggles I've faced during the little over 2 years I've been here, and mostly because historically there's been a lot of, well, there was a lot of negativity and false information being shared by what is now a former elected official while he was on the city council. And before, the city didn't really communicate at all. I mean, there was no form of communication going out. So, you know, when you have a very negative and critical voice sharing misinformation and you're not responding to it, not direct argument, but putting the accurate information out there, pretty soon people are just going to believe what they're hearing. And that was what I came to when I joined the city. So, you know, I think the first strategy that I implemented was trying to restore that trust by creating transparency and open communication, by building relationships with various community members and community organizations. And as I mentioned before, that started out with these district meetings. We have 5 districts, as I mentioned. Well, 4 of the 5 districts participated. You can guess the one that didn't participate. And pretty soon the community was really excited about when the next meeting was, and attendance was growing at these district meetings. I also started a bi-weekly written report that went out electronically. We posted on Facebook and our social media sites. And that gave people an opportunity just to hear about various projects the city had going on, and communicating some of the positive messages that we oftentimes in local government forget to share with the community. And it makes a big difference when people hear for 10 years how the municipal electric rates are the highest in the state, and then you actually are able to show data that proves that not to be the case. People are realizing that, oh, well, maybe there is a good story here, and it's telling our story. That's something that we have to do, and a lot of times we forget how important that is.
Yeah, getting that word out, I think, is a critical way of helping people to feel like they're part of the community. So thanks for that. Al, how does your engagement influence Ottawa County's success in maintaining its sense of community?
And that can be a really difficult task in Michigan County government. Having been both a city manager and a county administrator, it was a lot easier in a city. And mainly that's because Michigan is one of 11 counties that are kind of the old New York model style counties, where the county is kind of the social safety net. So we do mental health and public health and jail and countywide elected offices, of course, and sheriff and those kinds of things. Not the kinds of things that usually catch people on the best day of their lives. Usually, if some kind of trouble or concern or issue needs to be addressed. Whereas with cities, they're the ones out doing more of the parks, more of the streets, more of those daily services that people come into contact with. So city and township government in Michigan is typically where people feel more warmly about and have more knowledge about what their elected local government members do. And county government is a little more distant. I call it the best kept secret in government. And so we've worked hard though over the years to try to break those barriers down. Just a number of things. I do a digest. I try to do it weekly. It's probably become more of a twice a month, and It started out going just on the board, but now it goes out on the website. And I address it to 2,000 different stakeholders, local government, everybody elected to a local government board, local government managers, media, all of our department heads. And it gets opened by 800 people within 10 minutes when I send it out. So that's been a very effective communication tool. Also, we use Gov Delivery, and that requires somebody to subscribe. So they have to choose to pull, to Doug's earlier comment. They are to pull that information instead of us pushing that information. And so our county's 300,000 population. We've had 47,000 stakeholders choose to sign up for subscriptions through Gov Delivery to Ottawa County News and the many different buckets you could choose to get that from. In fact, the average subscriber has over 4 subscriptions. So we've got well over 160,000 subscriptions now out there, people who are choosing and wanting to know more about Ottawa County. We tried for years to bring the budget to the people physically, to go out and hold budget meetings in different quadrants of the county and that type of thing. It went well on the cold and rainy days and not so well on the warm and sunny days. It worked if we provided punch and cookies and, at the old folks home or something like that. So we tried everything, finally gave that up because we just simply didn't get the participation we were hoping for. But we also have developed very close relationships with our local units of government. We're now the IT department for 10 of our cities and counties. We're the assessing department for 5 of our cities and counties, finance department for 2, code enforcement for 2. So we've developed these relationships where we're more of a partner and a consultant than that other layer of government. And then I'd also say that, we, in order to measure how we're doing, we did start a citizen survey my second year on the job. We do it every other year. Right now, our approval rating is up to about 78%, and the pollsters tell me don't expect much more than that because there is that percentage of negativity that always exists towards government. And that's key because we actually passed up our local units of government for the first time in the last survey as far as approval rating goes. So, because one of the questions does ask about your approval rating for your city and township. And we use a polling firm from Lansing, so it's an external firm. It's a statistically significant study within a 4.5% margin of error. And that's been a great tool for us just to, and we have had improving citizen, both knowledge of what we do and appreciation of what we do over the 16 years that we've done that. So we've done 8 surveys during my tenure in Ottawa County so far. So that's been one good tool. And the other thing is we've worked hard to meet people where they're at. So, whether it's Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, we try to be out there where the people are. We do get comments, we do get criticism, we try to respond to everybody. And so it has been a relationship that we've developed over social media that's different than the traditional push things out through the, whether it's newspapers, radio, TV, whatever we're doing there, but also have that strategy of trying to meet people where they are today. Because there are different publics, different ages predominate in some of those different publics. And I think that, our goal has been to kind of tear the bricks and mortar down and to meet people where they're at and hopefully become a vibrant part of the community. And I think, so when COVID hits, we have that underlying strategy. And I'll just mention, we've had two federal lawsuits filed against us by organizations. One was a Libertas, a Christian school. One was a wedding venue that claimed we were violating First Amendment rights by not allowing people to get married or to have to wear masks at school. And it's really allowed us to communicate a lot on what is the role of county government. So yes, I'm the health department's director supervisor, but when it comes to enforcing the state's public health code, the Department of Health and Human Services director might as well be my health officer's boss, because neither I nor the county board have the ability to countermand that. And yet that's been a huge public sentiment that somehow our public has expected our county commissioners to be superheroes that fight back against the state when they take an oath of office to uphold state law. And so just being able to, I think, more intelligently address some of those governmental structure issues, because it is no longer taught in civics class in schools, has been one of the positive aspects of communication during the pandemic. But certainly I think all the efforts that we've done prior to the pandemic provided a foundation for us to work from instead of having to create the wheel at that time.
Yep. Thanks, Al. I love your digest idea, and it's particularly impressive to hear how many people are immediately picking up on that. That's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah. I also really resonate with the notion of the intergovernmental relationships that you've built. I think that one of the outcomes of this whole COVID thing is going to be an increase in those kind of conversations and kind of a reflection on how you can deliver services more efficiently.
Yeah.
So thanks for that. Well, let's move on to the third question. And I'll start with you, Doug, this time. Doug, can you talk about the tools the City of Banning is using to help measure feedback from your residents and businesses during this public health emergency?
Sure. I guess I'd start out by noting that I've been in local government long enough that I remember BSM before social media, including one of my first jobs introducing desktop computers and the internet to the local government. So although it makes you feel like a dinosaur, it's actually happened quite rapidly, or did happen quite rapidly. And the number of tools that are available now is almost overwhelming. I don't think there's a day goes by where my inbox isn't filled with emails and messages from various vendors who are offering communications and engagement tools. Since I've only been here, short time, we're just getting started implementing tools. As you know, that if a lot of those platforms take quite a bit of time to actually get installed and implemented. But one of the first things we've worked on, because of the importance of transparency, is our financial transparency and our budgeting transparency tools. And we've implemented OpenGov. It's a platform that we can put our financial information out in real time. And our community members can actually go in and they can drill down, they can create their own graphs and charts and do their own research, which is, generates more questions sometimes, but by monitoring how people are using it, we can then develop those reports so that they're out there, and it's got a storytelling module along with it that then allows us to take that experience people are having and actually turn it into telling stories about what people appear to be interested in. As Alan mentioned, monitoring what comments people are posting on social media is something that I find very important. And with that, I think it's important to also understand that the city manager, the CEO of the organization, really needs to set the tone for the rest of the organization regarding responsiveness to citizen inquiries. Oftentimes, if the city manager isn't interested in making sure people are getting answers to questions, then the department directors and staff aren't going to think it's that important either. And then you start getting calls from council members wanting questions answered on behalf of their constituents. So it's been important for me to make sure that not only am I available and accessible to community members when they have inquiries, but that the department directors understand that that's an important piece of the work that I expect to be done by the city. Other tools, we've in the past, I've used the National Citizen Survey or other survey mechanisms. It's a good snapshot at the time the survey is taken. What I've found oftentimes with those types of tools is that if there's a hot button issue, people seem to react to that in their responses right away, rather than an ongoing attitude toward your services. So the other thing I'm working on right now is a platform to report back performance on city objectives and goals. I believe it's important for the community to understand not only what we're trying to do, what our goals are, but how we're performing in terms of achieving those goals.
That's great. Thank you. Al, I know you talked about this a little bit in your prior response, but could you just talk a little bit more about the tools that you're using in Ottawa County to help you measure feedback from residents?
Yeah, there's 4 main ones. So one is Facebook and Twitter Insights. I won't say much about that. I think that's pretty commonly used. But the Gov delivery is huge because it provides analytic reports on recipient details, click-through rate, open rate, shares social media management. So basically, it really helps us understand what people are thinking, and we're able to measure marked increases in both subscribers and engagement. We had a 17% increase in subscriptions just during COVID. And we've also sent over 3.2 million messages and 34,000 text messages through Gov delivery. So, and those are basically in response to requests. And so, yes, that's, I think, a huge amount of engagement. Another great tool that I was going to recommend that the board adopt, and then we hired it through CARES Act and emergency management process, is a tool called Zen City. Zen City is a artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing tool that basically culls all the social media messages in a jurisdiction. Now, it doesn't give you URLs or violate privacy in any way, but keywords are put in, and then it will measure sentiment, positive, negative, or neutral. And just a quick example of how that was cool. So again, in my conservative county, a lot of pushback by business back in April, May, June, on the governor shutting the state down and some of those things. Huge pushback on my commissioners. Well, we knew through Zen City that 69% of the people in Ottawa County were basically in favor of the governor's measures. And so it provided another view that was counter to the emails and calls that commissioners were getting at the time. We also were able to use it to fix some of our own messaging that we could tell was being interpreted incorrectly. And so the message wasn't going through the way we wanted. And through Zen City, we could see that response and we could retailor our message, put it back out, and then measure how effective that was. So, and literally millions of messages are called, by the AI tool, machine learning tool, in order to come up with that data. So that ended up, and that's something that will have permanent. Our detective bureau and the sheriff's office loves it. Our health department thinks they can spot outbreaks in the future post-COVID. So we think that's another great tool. Lastly, there's a product called Munetrix in the state. So the company took all the budgets and audits of all public agencies of the state from the Department of Treasury, where we all have to send them every year, created a huge database, and we subscribe to that so we can give numbers to the board of how we compare on expenditures per capita or whatever. But they quickly turned the tool into a comparison of COVID statewide. And that's been a great tool to communicate with both our board and the public as far as where does Ottawa County kind of stand in relation to other places in the state regarding COVID. So I would say those are 4 tools that have been really impactful in our ability to communicate where we're at.
That's great. Those all sound like great tools. So thanks.
And engage, I should say, not just where we're at, but to get engagement from people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Theo, what tools are you using in Dayton for measuring resident feedback during COVID?
When we started out, quite frankly, we were wanting to get boots on the ground. We wanted our staff to get out, talk with businesses, talk with residents. And so we spent a lot of time trying to understand if our social media was working, if our traditional media was working. And to me, one of the best ways to figure that out was to actually
we lost you again, Theo.
I'm back. Sorry.
Okay.
we wanted to actually meet with the stakeholders of the community and actually get some feedback. And so a lot of early on trying to understand our effectiveness was actually just asking the question of those that we were actually reaching out to, not necessarily through a survey or anything. One of the things we did do was I wanted to measure behavior. I thought that was going to be a very interesting thing. And so one of the things we pushed very early on was we had just placed a cash handling kiosk for our utility billing and municipal court fines. And so we really pushed people to go to those. And so some of the data we wanted to see was, how many transactions and what are the percentage changes. And we saw a market increase. I'm talking like, over 40% increase in the use of our basically self-serving kiosks around the city, which was a big help for us in maintaining safety for our staff. Another thing we did was we encouraged our developers and contractors to do paperless submissions for their civil reviews. We incorporate, and so we saw a very large increase in that number as well. And even as we reopened our offices and went back to our kind of normal operations, of course, with plenty of precautions, those electronic submissions have remained high. And I think that's going to be a permanent change along the way as well. So I think it's important not just to look at what, is our message getting out? Are we changing behavior? I think that's a big question, is are we changing behaviors? And so a lot of my focus has been really looking at, in areas that we've asked people to be safe, are they being safe? And I can honestly say that by large leaps and bounds, the residents of Dayton have taken that message to heart, because the numbers show it through our electronic means.
Well, that's very cool. So you're using kind of a multifaceted way, electronic as well as in person, for garnering that. And I agree with you on the whole notion of impacting behavior, because at the end of the day, during this challenge, this public health challenge, that is the measure, isn't it? Are you effectively changing behavior? Well, thanks to all of you for responding to those questions. I'd like to give each of you an opportunity, if there's anything that anybody said that you have a question about, just to see if, go ahead and feel free to ask each other anything that's on your mind.
I just want to say is that I think Zen City is a great tool. Very intrigued by it.
That's great. One question that I'd like to ask all of you to respond to is just what's the biggest challenge right now that you're confronting with your organization? Just a single thing that you're really focusing in on. And I'll open the floor to anybody that wants to respond.
I would say, at least from the city of Dayton side, is continuity of service. Obviously, we've had COVID positive cases, making sure that we are being socially conscious, making sure that our staff is being socially conscious, not going out and exposing themselves too much, and having the contingency plans in place whenever you do have to isolate half of a department, and so that's been the biggest challenge, especially as the pandemic has gone into several months. It's one thing to do this for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, but we're going to be clocking a year very soon in this matter. And so continuity of service is something that we're always thinking about at all times, and trying to make sure that our staff stays diligent through the holiday season.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Doug, I just have to imagine the pressures and the challenges that have been in your community, given you also having to deal with the fires.
Yeah, the fires were definitely, I don't know how to describe it, not the icing on the cake, but certainly stretched us to the limits as far as making sure we were not only communicating to the community, but responding to the immediate needs of evacuating about I think we ended up evacuating something like 5,000 out of the 14,000 homes in the community.
Right. Hmm.
We have a police department that typically has 3 to 4 officers on duty at a given time. Well, how do you evacuate 5,000 homes with 4 officers? It's when you have a wildfire, coming down the mountains toward them. So we actually brought in the cooperation from neighboring departments and the sheriff, and we're able to do it very orderly. But stretching when you're trying to social distance and operate in an emergency like a wildfire, the game changes quite a bit, and then you automatically go to focus on the work at hand, and it's pretty easy to forget that you also have to pay attention to the safety issues related to the pandemic.
Yep. Thanks. Al, anything come to mind to you?
Yeah, I would just mention that, as Doug said, we actually had 4 emergencies going on at one point because we've had historic Lake Michigan levels. We had houses falling in. That was like a year ago, but it was kind of still an ongoing concern. Flooding in weird areas of the county that never had flooding before, and then aftermath of George Floyd. I mean, those are all things that were kind of happening at the same time. But I would say right now, focus is trying to provide service, keep employees safe. We've had more of an outbreak. We had, I think, 34 employees in November alone get COVID, and just so continuity of service is a key. And then also the thing that bothers me the most right now, I would say, is just the wide range between people who still think that COVID's a myth and the people that take it very seriously. There's just more. It bothers me the extent to which people can't agree on what truth is, and I think it permeates almost everything, our daily activity, the kind of complaints our commissioners get, and our involvement in helping to try to promote better public understanding of things, and people that have checked out of media because they don't trust media. It's just kind of a different world when things go haywire, and you've got that kind of a public, a civic kind of foundation that it's resting on.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks to all of you for participating in the panel conversation. Pretty amazing stuff that you've talked about. A couple of things that just really impressed me was the cross-sector, the incorporation of your private sector community partners for building engagement and helping with this whole sense of community. Of course, the use of technology is quickly becoming the way of helping residents to get involved, particularly just because everybody is confined to their homes and working remotely. But one thing that all of you have emphasized, and it sounds like you're all doing just excellent work, is the importance of engagement in this whole realm of building community, and especially as we're working through this public health emergency, the roles that you play as local government leaders and all of your staff. So staying connected and being creative in the ways that you're helping to keep residents feeling like their voices are being heard and that they're having an impact on local operations. So thanks for your participation on responding to all of the questions. Just a couple of final kind of administrative remarks. I will be following up with all of you. I'll make sure that you have each other's contact information so that you can connect with each other if you want to learn more from each other. Next week, we're going to be holding a panel again. We've invited in the communities of Scottsdale, Arizona, Washoe County, Wisconsin, and Yakuts, Oregon. So I'm looking forward to that as well. About a week, I'll be sending you a full version of this recorded session and including some small segments so that you'll be able to share. Remember, the intent of this whole program is to share your perspectives with others so others can benefit from the things that you're doing well, and just to help them survive this challenge that we're all confronting. And then finally, I certainly would welcome any feedback that you have on how we can make this program more meaningful and help get the perspectives of leaders like you, just so that as we move forward in the jobs that we're all doing, that we're we're meeting the objectives. And so with that, I just want to thank all of you for participating and wish you well in everything that you're doing.